Well, pack it up, pack it in, let me begin. Here we are in 2026 with the first video of the year, where I thought that instead of looking ahead to the future, I'd instead dwell on the past. Because for the last couple of weeks, I've spent a bit of time going back and replaying through a bunch of older games that I never really had time with throughout the year. A few of which I realised were cross-gen titles, that being games released primarily for both the 7th and 8th generation. And I do, if nothing else, like putting myself through pain and misery, which made me think it'd somehow be a good idea to take a look at some of the more infamous examples with these cross-gen releases. I mean, what else am I going to do during the holidays, you know? Spend time with my friends and family? Lol.
Now go! Let the legend come back to life.
I should mention too that again this isn't any kind of complete or extensive list, just a bunch of titles that I bought and ended up playing through, so if there's something missing from the video then be sure to let me know and maybe I can check it out in the future. Make sense? Right, let's get into it.
Those who oppose, whimper nay!
Now the first game in this list is Assassin's Creed Black Flag, what most people often agree to be the best game in Ubisoft's long-running series. It was originally released back in 2013 with versions for both the PS4 and Xbox One, but then also those 7th generation consoles with the 360 and the PS3, the latter being the one I played for this video.
Come gentlemen, we have much to discuss.
Well, at least I tried to, and I say that because after installing the game on my hard drive and then downloading whatever patch it needed, it wouldn't start and kept hanging on this loading screen. So I tried deleting the game files, I reinstalled it, I tried it without the updates and all of that stuff, and still the same thing. At this point I assumed it had to be something wrong with the disc, so just to be sure, I went out and bought another copy, only for the exact same thing to happen.
You are one pathetic loser.
At which point I just gave up and bought it for the 360, which worked instantly and without any dramas. And finally, I was able to get into the game to see just how terrible this version is. Only to find out that it actually isn't terrible. In fact, it's pretty damn good. Because as it turns out, Black Flag was originally developed with the 7th generation consoles in mind, but at some point in 2012, Ubisoft decided to make it available on the PS4 and the Xbox One. Which means that the only real differences between them are purely visual, and even then, not even as much as you'd think. I mean, the main thing is obviously the overall image resolution and the textures, with the later gen version looking a lot crisper. The lighting and other effects like water also look better as well, but really that's about it.
You put me at ease, sir.
The only thing I really noticed was that the frame rate can be a bit choppy in certain areas, and every now and then you'll see an NPC that looks like some kind of cosmic horror entity. But other than that, like, this version holds up surprisingly well. I hadn't actually played through Black Flag for probably like 7 or 8 years before I started playing this, and I figured that I just need to get a couple of hours of footage to use for this video, but this thing is still so playable and addictive that I ended up playing it for about 10 or so hours.
Edward, is it?
And the reason for that is that all of the gameplay features and the mechanics are still here. You got the ship combat stuff, which is still really fun and smooth to control, and none of those story elements are sacrificed either.
What have you heard?
You know, probably because you're playing the game that Ubisoft originally intended for people to play, with it being built primarily for these platforms. So yeah, all in all, damn good stuff, and probably something that played a large role in why this entry sold so many copies. I mean, keep in mind, man, that this thing sold over 11 million copies that year alone. Nowadays, if a AAA game breaks 1 million, it's cause for celebration. I might be setting the bar a bit high here though, because this definitely ain't going to be the case for the other games we're going to be talking about. And in fact, the same definitely can't be said for the next game in the list with the PS3 and Xbox 360 port for Alien Isolation.
Are you a fucking ass?
Now, I think most fans would agree that Alien Isolation is not only one of the best Alien games ever made, but also just one of the best horror games ever made too. It tells the story of Ellen Ripley's daughter, Amanda, heading to a space station to recover the black box from her mother's ship, the Nostromo, all to seek answers for her mum's disappearance after those events in the first movie. All to find the station's inhabitants have gone crazy paranoid after a xenomorph's gotten loose and started killing everyone.
Where'd you come from, Ripley?
Leaving poor Amanda having to hide in lockers and under tables as she finds the means to escape. Yeah, sounds pretty terrifying, but the real horror here is how this PS3 port plays. For starters, the load times alone are just insanely long, with it often taking upwards of a minute to even load in save files and just get into the game to begin with. The cinematics at the start do give you a bit of false hope, making the game look pretty good until you remember that these are all pre-rendered. And once you get into things, you see how fuzzy and muddy it all actually looks, where almost every visual aspect, from the lighting through to the character models, has been really downgraded.
Don't tell them anything. Look, I've got the elevator working. Jana, let's go, okay?
I'm sorry. Good luck.
It does look like shit.
And because of how muddy things often are, I often found it really hard to just see those basic visual cues as well, like the alien's drool coming out of those ceiling vents. The frame rate isn't that great either, and that very early scene where you see the alien killing a bunch of people off in the distance is almost kind of ruined because of how slow and sluggish it all plays out. In fact, every time you see something happening off in the distance, it's got this really weird LOD thing going on, because it's obviously having to be simplified to save on memory. During cinematics, there's this weird effect too, where when the camera angle changes, you'll often see this quick flicker on the screen or a black frame, as if that video file hasn't been converted properly, which is very jarring as well.
Fuck, hating this.
And then throughout the game, there's lots of random moments where it just locks up for like a couple of seconds. What is kind of weird though is that as far as PS3 games go, this is actually quite impressive, and would easily be one of the best looking games on the platform. And some of the visual effects are top notch by that generation's standards, like how the flamethrower looks for instance, and certain reflective surfaces. But it's really mired by this overall performance, which just drags the whole thing down. And the absolute worst thing in that regard is how this version now has to load in the next room or area when you try to move through certain doors. Basically what's happening is for like a few seconds, a door is just simply not gonna open, while it's presumably loading all of this crap in the background. To the point though where this could absolutely get you killed. Like if you're trying to time your escape out of the air or something while the alien's not looking, only to be faced with this 3 or 4 second long delay as the next room loads in.
Come on, hurry, 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 hurry! Come on!
Oh yeah, something which doesn't happen on the PC, by the way. Good. I'm also almost certain that the train you wait for early on after first encountering the Xeno takes longer to get to the station as well. Then there's just other random glitches here too, like parts of the environment not loading in properly, or weird visual glitches and aberrations. During one of the many times I was hiding from the alien, when I went under this table, it then seemed to teleport me to this black void. There was one scripted event where the game froze up, and I genuinely thought at first that this had killed my PS3. And then at one point the game wouldn't even load in the next level and kept freezing on the loading screen. Something which was apparently a known issue, seeing as I found a bunch of other people online also having that same problem, where the solution was that I had to delete the update and then re-download it. Suppose I should mention too that I only tested out the PlayStation 3 version, and from what I have read online, the 360 is supposed to be mostly better. Mostly. And yeah, like I could probably go through each version and spend hours trying to find the differences, but I'd rather shit into my hands and then clap.
You get it?
Okay.
I will give this thing credit in one way though, in that despite it having a whole list of issues, it still achieves that desired effect of scaring the absolute piss out of the player. You know, as in piss is gonna leave your body. And overall, I still had my asshole jumping up into my throat every time a Joe ambushed me from behind, or the Xeno decided to drop in to say hello from a nearby vent. But while it may not be an entirely unplayable version, I just can't imagine why anyone would really want to bother. Considering on PC, for instance, this game is cheaper than taking your mum out for a seafood dinner. And playing this game also doesn't end with you having crabs or a burning pee hole. Now, there's been quite a few crappy cross-gen releases for the Call of Duty series throughout the years. Call of Duty 3, for instance, on the PS3 and the PS2 pretty much instantly comes to mind, along with Ghosts and then Advanced Warfare. But most of these are just visually downgraded versions of the same game, and aside from Call of Duty 3, more than playable. The most egregious example, I reckon though, has to be what they did with Black Ops 3 back in 2015 for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. simply because for these versions they decided to remove the single player campaign and just include the multiplayer and the zombies component.
Black Ops, weapons free.
Making it, I'm pretty sure, the only mainline entry version ever that didn't include a campaign. Outside of obviously Black Ops 4, which didn't have one at all, regardless of the platform. And not to mention, they still charged full price for this.
Enemy down.
Now, to be honest, you're not really missing out on all that much there with the campaign, considering it's arguably one of the weakest ones in the series' history.
What are they strapping to his neck?
But I mean, still, like, that's something that should be left up to the player to form their own opinion of, you know, not just removed from the game entirely. Also, considering the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One had been out for like 2 years by this point, there was just no real reason this version needed to exist in the first place. And you'd have to assume that most people who are fans of the series and heavily into gaming would have migrated to the next generation by then anyway. But I don't know, like, far be it from Activision to not make as much money as possible as they could from selling something. What's worse too is that it's now become even more redundant, because while the servers are still technically up and running, absolutely no one is playing it. The same which can't be said for the others, with even Black Ops 3 on the PC still pulling in thousands of players a day. This means the only way to get a match going is by playing against the bots, but as anyone who's played COD multiplayer is going to tell you, bot match experience and your levels gained doesn't count towards your online progress. So you're really just playing with yourself for no reason, and yeah, believe you me, there's better ways to go about doing that. Even if you do decide to play it that way, you're going to quickly notice just how crappy it runs and plays overall, coming nowhere near that 60 FPS target that the multiplayer modes always seem to strive for. Overall, it really stands the test of time as this eternal monument to corporate greed, a shoddy, half-assed product missing crucial features. All to just shove out as many copies of something as possible. And yeah, the sad part is, I guess it paid off, considering that apparently Black Ops 3 still sold over 43 million something copies worldwide, which is just insane.
The CDP stands strong.
Next up, we're going back to another Ubisoft game with 2014's Far Cry 4.
You and I are gonna tear shit up!
Someone cooked here.
A title which started development before the PS4 and the Xbox One were even announced, but one that very obviously flourished much more on those platforms along with the PC than it did on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Now, getting this thing running on my PlayStation 3 wasn't that hard, however, it was time consuming. I mean, for starters, I had to install the game and then download whatever update it needed, both of which took me like half an hour. Then I had to log into the Far Cry 4 servers, sit through a whole bunch of splash screens before finally being able to get into the game. Where, like Alien Isolation, I was a little bit faulty early on at how good it all looked, until remembering that yet again this opening cinematic is pre-rendered, and once you're into that in-game engine, you see how bad things truly are. And yeah, holy shit, this really doesn't look all that great, does it?
Again, terribly sorry for what happened before. This is more what I had in mind. So, fresh start, introductions.
Meanwhile...
Again, terribly sorry for what happened before. This is more what I had in mind. So, fresh start, introductions.
Because despite this also being developed with 7th generation consoles in mind, it's clearly not worked as well here as Black Flag did.
Head to the tower. Okay.
You can do this, Ajay.
Now, when I think of the visuals in this game, I always think about this bit early on when you're climbing up that mountain and you can see that first tower off in the distance. You got all these Tibetan prayer flags off in the distance, and it's absolutely picturesque. Really communicating to the player as well that this journey is going to be a hell of a lot different to the one in the third game. Here though, that magic is just ruined on account of how bad the whole thing looks. Then you factor in all those other expected performance problems too, with the constant frame rate drops during combat, and even worse stuttering when you're mucking about in vehicles. Combined with other stuff like input lag, which makes something as simple as shooting someone needlessly challenging. Now again, I do need to mention that I only checked this one out on PS3, and from what I've read, the 360 version supposedly is kind of improved, which is a bit of a depressing trend amongst a lot of these cross-platform titles. But I think it's another interesting example of where some things come out very late in that generation's life cycle. And Far Cry 4 really did come at that tail end where developers started to realize that and stopped making games for these platforms. Again though, like Black Flag, it obviously didn't seem to hurt things overall, considering it still sold 7 million copies that year. I don't know, it's just kind of sad to think that a significant portion of those sales numbers was probably people playing it on the PS3 or the Xbox 360. And that is the definition of insanity. The next game we're looking at is arguably on a grander scale than even Far Cry 4 was, and that's Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Released back in 2015, it was an entry that divided the fans quite a bit. Some people lauding its open-ended and highly addictive gameplay, and then other people lamenting its unfinished nature and repetition, not to mention its questionable ending. Either way though, it's still a game that's one of a kind, and the sheer fact that it somehow exists and functions on the PS3 and the Xbox 360 is utter black magic. No doubt largely due to the impressive Fox engine, an engine which seemed like it was almost created solely for Metal Gear Solid 5. Part of what makes it so impressive is its scalability, and no better evidence of that is when you're looking at this PS3 version. A lot of the interior areas, for instance, still look pretty damn good, especially during those earlier sections during the hospital prologue where it still feels very atmospheric and cinematic. When you get to Afghanistan and that more opened up map, however, you can see where a lot of the downgrades start to come in, mostly just with this reduced draw distance and the lack of props and other objects. Plus, the amount of popping when you're moving around is also super noticeable, with trees and rocks just sort of appearing out of thin air. And the overall texture quality and lower resolution can make certain elements near unreadable. Like the texture on the shower back in Mother Base, for instance, can barely be made out. The other thing I noticed is that during the nighttime, it's almost impossible to see anything, with it being really super dark for some reason, way more than it was on the PC or PS4. And even when I'd calibrated the brightness settings, as you're supposed to, I still couldn't see jack shit. Which means you almost have to play the missions at daytime or else you're quite literally wandering around in the dark. Overall though, it's not the worst looking game made for the platform, though I do think MGS4 still looks substantially better, even if the environments there are overall way smaller. Plus there was just something about MGS4's overall art style that's aged a whole lot better I think than 5's has. But you know what, it almost doesn't really matter.
This isn't about the past. We're fighting for the future.
Because once you get into that flow where the game firmly grabs you by the ballsack and doesn't let go, you really start to forget about all these downgrades. Because most importantly, all of those aspects of the gameplay still remain intact.
No sign of the enemy. Mission complete, boss.
Like going around capturing outposts, extracting soldiers to build your army back at Mother Base, or just watching some of the most batshit insane cutscenes in all of gaming. At least pre-Death Stranding.
You remember?
Also still including one of the best cinematics in the series where Snake literally puts himself back together again, while Donna Burke's haunting and emotive singing goes on in the background.
That was intense.
Yeah.
I actually did a video on MGS5 a few months back, and I had a whole bunch of people in the comments mentioning how they played through this on the PS3 or the 360, and not a single one of them seemed to bring up the performance. Which I think just goes to show you how solid this thing was overall, regardless of how you played it.
That's the target.
The one thing that does suck though is that there's no online functionality anymore, because according to the game, the online services have concluded.
What? No.
And this does kind of suck because it prevents you from getting those rewards you get from S ranking the missions. Rewards which quite often were in the form of higher ranked soldiers, which early on there really helped to build up Mother Base and let you upgrade all of your gear. This also does seem to be something limited to the PS3 and the 360, because I remember when I was playing through this for that aforementioned video that this mode was still working on the PC. I think it's just kind of telling in how these online mechanics really don't age all that well if they're not constantly being maintained. In fact, I was even replaying through GTA 5 recently on the PS3 as well. And that whole stock market website you could use to invest in shares wasn't working either, because Rockstar shut down the support for that too. At the end of the day though, like, I can't imagine why anyone would still choose to play this on the PS3 or the Xbox 360, but I guess the takeaway here is that if you did, well, it really couldn't have been that bad. And you know what? It's still more fun to play through than the Twin Snakes. Yeah, I said it.
Amazing. Mission complete. That right there is why you're the best, boss. The one and only.
Up next, however, is one of the all-time worst cross-gen releases of all time with Monolith Productions' Shadow of Mordor. And yeah, now we're really getting into some serious shit.
The fun begins.
What can I first say about Shadow of Mordor though? Well, I don't know, it's easily one of the best Lord of the Rings games ever made. A sort of open-world action stealth game, highly influenced by, and I do mean highly, the Arkham series and Assassin's Creed. To the point that it just outright copies over Arkham's entire combat system, along with utilizing Assassin's Creed style parkour and its assassination mechanics. But as they say, if you're gonna steal, steal from the best, and this is still absolute peak gaming right here. I actually went back and played through Shadow of Mordor recently on my PC, and I was really surprised at how well some of its mechanics still hold up, especially with the combat and the presentation.
Man swine! Should know better than to get in the way of an Uduk's hunt.
For this version though, on the PS3, the same cannot be said. And the visuals are so bad here that the first time it loaded into actual gameplay, I audibly and inadvertently said, wow to myself. Like my mouth reacted to this before my brain did.
You'll have to hit harder if you want to best your father.
I mean, this is just a shockingly bad looking game compared to its PC and PS4 counterparts. And that jump between the pre-rendered to the in-engine stuff has got to be the most jarring I think I've ever seen.
Happy anniversary, mother.
Alien.
Wow.
It hardly even looks like a PS3 game at times. The simplicity with the environments and the character models could genuinely pass itself off as a late PS2 or an Xbox title. I mean, it's really that bad.
You maggot! Another schrock that needs to be put back in its place.
But you know what? I don't even think I like saying that as a comparison. I mean, that's kind of insulting to PS2 and Xbox games. What this version also severely neuters is the whole Nemesis system. Now, this was that incredibly cool feature where you had all these unique Uruk captains with different personalities and different strengths along with weaknesses.
I'll cut you open along with any Uruk that gets between us.
And a huge component of the overall experience was going around the map and killing these guys, along with playing digital chess as you could let them rise up or down the ranks, interfering in certain activities to either let them prosper or perish. Or, you know, just let all this stuff happen organically, as it would all change automatically as in-game time passed. If you killed one of them, it was even common for them to cheat death and return, sporting some new kind of scar or a disfigurement as a testament to your past encounters.
Get on your knees and beg forgiveness for what you did to my face.
But now all of that stuff carrying over is a lot more simple and in some cases just non-existent. There's not even any real lip syncing either during the in-engine stuff, and when the captains grab you and say their little spiel, a lot of which was highly entertaining, their mouths now barely even move.
Come to join us, my sweet. You're just in time for the fighting!
Not like this. Not like this.
Before starting the missions where you take these guys on, you'd get a preview screen of the captain you were fighting to kind of help you identify them visually, but here that feature doesn't even seem to work and it just weirdly mirrors your screen.
It's horrible. Horrible.
The worst thing by far though, again, has to be the performance and the loading times, not to mention the constant and abundance of these throughout the game. I mean, anyone who's played this knows that you spend a fair bit of time going through the menus, mostly planning out which captain you're going to take down next, which, like I said, is a crucial component to the overall experience. Here though, every single time you try to access that army page, it takes like 10 seconds to simply load everything in. And even then, there's still noticeable pop-in as the models are still being pasted together. Same thing with all the various collectibles, where the model is at its lowest possible detail for like 3 seconds before the console finally catches up. And during certain mission cinematics, there's a loading screen every single time the camera perspective changes. So what should normally be like a 4 or 5 second long cutscene goes for upwards of 30. Even simply pausing the game and then unpausing it has a 10 or so second long delay of its own. Yes, pausing the game. As for the actual gameplay, well, I don't know, dog, just look at it. It's got all the last gen trimmings with the expected frame rate and other performance issues, with the whole thing just looking and running like absolute ass. Wet ass. When you're moving about on Caragors, it's almost like you're moving too fast for the engine to keep up, and it stutters along constantly like it can barely load in the rest of the world in time.
Bullshit, what the fuck?
The level of detail distance is really short too, making objects off in the near distance look very low quality. But then even when you're standing right next to something, it's still common to not see it even rendered in yet. Combat is just a disaster here as well, and it's so fucking sluggish, you feel like a drunk hobo swinging around a rotten baguette. And precise aiming and hitting things with the bow is more or less impossible too. Not to mention, the game just seems to flat out ignore your inputs, which I'm absolutely certain has to do with that low frame rate. I mean, anyone who's played this game properly knows that it becomes an absolute power fantasy very early on, letting you just destroy droves of enemies with ease. Here though, as soon as I had more than like 4 or 5 guys to deal with at once, the game shat itself, and I could barely counter a single hit.
I'll just see you something.
Meanwhile,
I mean, it really does get to the point here that it's unplayable. In fact, at one point, it literally got unplayable and froze my console, forcing me to do a hard reset. So, yeah, out of all the games in this video, this version is by far the worst. And I mean, stuff like Alien Isolation and Far Cry 4 are also pretty crappy, but at least in those versions you could still kinda get by. Shadow of Mordor though is all about high intensity melee combat against large groups of enemies at once, where timing and coordination is paramount to success. And to be needlessly handicapped by crappy visuals, input delay, and sloppy performance undermines what's otherwise a super satisfying combat system. Or I don't know, like maybe the fact that I just spent 20 hours playing this on the PC is gonna make the differences more jarring. But even still, man, like you don't need to be an expert to see how much this version just fucking sucks. I should mention too that yes, I did test this out on the 360, and while this version does seem to be slightly better, I still do think that asking someone which one they prefer is like asking them if they prefer eating dog or cat shit. And either way, like whoever made the decision to release this thing on the 7th generation of consoles to begin with either needs their head examined or the next available appointment for chemical castration. Finally, we've come to the last game in the list with 2014's Watchdogs. Yes, another Ubisoft title, which if nothing else seemed to install and update itself on my PS3 without any dramas. Only, maybe it didn't, because once I got into the game, I noticed that it was missing most of the sounds. As in, like, 90% of the sound effects were just completely absent. So again, like, I thought this might have been a problem with the disc, like it was with Black Flag, which meant I went out and bought another copy. And guess what? It did the same fucking thing.
Glad you asked.
Turns out it's another well-known issue, this time apparently the fault of whatever the latest patch is that they made for the game. And deleting the update and just playing the launch version weirdly seemed to fix it.
That's good.
The only caveat was that I had this bug where the save icon would just hang on my screen for minutes at a time. And also, while the sound was now working, technically, the sound mixing seemed to be way off, with certain sounds playing louder than others, which in one particular instance was very awkward. Seriously though, like what is it with these old Ubisoft games not working?
My God, don't you ever loosen up?
What is it with all these PS3 and 360 games needing so much effort to simply get running in the first place? You know what happens if you ever try to play like a PS2 game or a PS1 game and load it up? It just works instantly. Anyway, again, like first impressions aren't too bad here, and it does look pretty good for a PS3 and Xbox 360 era game. Easily on par with the kind of thing we got in GTA 5. I mean, the driving is definitely crappier with the more sluggish frame rate, making vehicle handling and avoiding collisions a pain in the arse at times, but I very quickly got the hang of that, and certain vehicles handle better than others anyway. What I quickly learned though is that while the game does look decent at night time, it looks absolutely horrendous during the day, especially in brighter areas. And I think the reason for that is because whatever lighting trick or effect they've used on the PS4 and the PC versions just hasn't really translated all that well over to this much weaker version, making it almost look like it's some kind of glitch, as if the light just hasn't been calculated properly. That is the kind of issue you face when a game's been made for a certain kind of hardware and then had to be scaled back for a weaker platform.
Oh, Jesus, Aiden, just leave it. It's fine.
It's fine. He thinks he can get inside.
How do you know what he thinks?
You're checking the locks.
Look, I can handle this on my own. We do not need your help.
How bad is it?
It's bad.
Also too, as an example, why I think GTA 5, for instance, doesn't suffer from the same thing, where there's a level of consistency to all the environments and the locations because they've all been designed and developed with a certain platform's limitations in mind. For Watchdogs, however, that doesn't seem like it was the case. It's a title that seems developed for the PS4 and the Xbox One, and one that's now been scaled down for these older platforms. Which is why, you know, sometimes the game looks fine, whereas other times it looks like this. The various weather effects have also been totally nerfed, really ruining the vibe and atmosphere of playing as this sullen vigilante patrolling the streets of Chicago. I mean, the aesthetic in that game when you're walking around during a rain or thunderstorm is just next level. You got puddles of water casting reflections, there's the wind in your coat, the steam escaping from sewer grates, and the sound of a subway cart rattling off in the distance. Here though, it's not even remotely the same. The rain effect looks really weird now too, like it's some kind of PNG file that's just looping over and over on the player's position, as opposed to, you know, actual dynamic rain falling around you. What I find even more unforgivable though is how this version doesn't have that dashcam view mode when driving cars. Now, on the PS4 and the PC, you could change your view to see things from Aiden's perspective, which was a really immersive viewpoint and a great way to skulk around the streets. Here though, for some reason, it just doesn't exist. Then there's all the other weird bugs and errors, like textures or models not loading in properly. Well, how about this bit here, where this dude falls to the ground during an animation before he'd even been shot? Yeah, don't even get me started on the swimming.
The F word.
To be fair though, like this also might be because I'm playing the unpatched version, but then again, like that's also kind of telling, you know, considering that was the only way I could even get the game to work in the first place. I will say though that yet again, it almost doesn't kind of matter.
Was that so hard?
And I don't know if it's because I haven't really played through Watchdogs for a few years, but I still reckon overall this whole thing slaps. I'd totally forgotten about some of the really cool sequences in the game, like that awesome mission for instance where you're ambushing a bunch of gangbangers and then Wu-Tang just starts randomly playing in the background. Even just going around stopping random crimes or escaping from these high-speed chases by causing people to crash into bollards, I still think is really fun. Nowadays, most people probably remember this because of its whole E3 drama, where it showcased that footage that looked nothing like the final product. But I think there is still something undeniably enjoying about the gameplay loop here. Also coming from a time where the industry wasn't afraid and still took risks and created new IPs. but it is another one of those examples of a 7th gen game really holding on for dear life as the 8th generation started to replace it. Still sure plays a whole lot better than Shadow of Mordor though. Either way though, that about brings us to the end of the video.
That's good.
And as usual, yes, I'm sure there's a bunch of games I missed that I probably could have talked about, so if you can think of any that I might have missed, be sure to let me know in the comments section below. Plus also, if you've had any experiences with these games of your own, be it good or bad, well, yeah, I'd love to hear about those too. And as always, thanks for watching.